Welcome. I'm Karen Lips, president of the Network of Enlightened Women, known as NEW. We're excited. We've deemed 2021 the year of the conservative woman. And as part of that programming, we're featuring a conservative woman of the month each month. For this month, May, I'm especially excited to have my friend Katie Pavlich as our May Conservative Woman of the Month. She is a Fox News contributor, editor of Town Hall, and a board member of NEW, and an inspiration to women across the country. Thank you so much, Katie. We are thrilled to have you.
Thanks for having me, Karen. It's great to be here.
So you are on the news, on Fox News all the time. You're writing all the time. You're tweeting all the time. I'd love it if you could share the story of how you got into journalism originally with our students.
Yeah, so I actually was kind of trying to figure out in college what I wanted to do, wasn't quite clear on what I wanted to do. Tried and attempted to get into business school, discovered that my second accounting class wasn't really going to get me there. And so I thought that I wanted to be a sports journalist because I loved sports. My family comes from a sports background. My grandpa was a high school and football coach, and he's in the Arizona Coaches Hall of Fame. My great aunt was the associate athletic director at the University of Arizona for 30 years, and I played sports in high school. And so I just really enjoyed that. But then I discovered that I really liked politics more, and sports was more of a hobby rather than a career. And I actually went to a Young America's Foundation conference, and that's when I really decided, okay, obviously I should be doing political journalism. So I switched my major to political journalism. I started working for the local campus TV station, and then I moved to Washington DC for a summer to do an internship actually with Town Hall. So I've gone from intern to where I am now. And I worked here for a summer in DC, and then I went back to finish my last year of college and continued working from the ground there. So at the time there was a lot happening in Arizona, and there was a lot of opportunity there for me to kind of be a local reporter for a national outlet. So SB 1070 had passed. They said it was a controversial immigration bill. It really was not. John McCain had just come off of his presidential run and was running for re-election in the Senate, and Sarah Palin was in the state campaigning for him. So there was a lot going on that I was able to cover locally for a national outlet. So when I graduated, I moved across the country all by myself and started working in DC in media. So that's kind of how it happened.
Katie, you bring up Senator McCain and Governor Palin. That seems like so long ago, doesn't it? We've had so
Yeah, it
many
does.
political cycles.
I always joke about how my life is really mapped out in political cycles. So when is their midterm election? When are the governors up for re-election? What is the presidential elections, the Senate elections, the balance of power in the Senate and the House? So yeah, my life is pretty much driven by political cycles.
Well, you get a little break right now, at least, so that's nice.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
Well, and Katie, when you came out to DC after graduating, you went directly back to Town Hall where you had interned, right?
Yep. They
So could you talk
luckily they
about, I think
hired
a lot of
me,
our,
so that
what?
was great.
Yeah, can
Luckily
you
they
talk
hired
about,
me, so that was nice.
yeah, can you talk about how you transitioned and how you really showed that you would be a great employee during your internship so that Town Hall was excited to hire you?
Yeah, so when I moved to DC for the summer, it was one of those things where I wasn't in DC to party, I wasn't in DC to make friends, I was in DC to work for the summer. And that doesn't mean it wasn't really fun, but what I spent my spare time doing was going to extra conferences, to networking events after work, and really just diving in and doing anything extra that I could, and not limiting myself to maybe the description of the internship. I really tried to go above and beyond and take on different projects and stories that maybe weren't necessarily assigned to me. I think a lot of the time interns kind of feel like, their internship is a very specific set of guidelines and assignments, and maybe they don't feel like they should try and branch out, but I really did. And I just worked really hard in DC and proved that I could do a lot. And Town Hall gave me a lot of opportunity. They never treated me like an intern who should grab coffee. They treated me like I was a full-time employee, even though I was already just an intern. And so I was writing for our national magazine, which at the time was printed and sold in bookstores like Barnes and Noble and Borders across the country. That was awesome. So really, they just treated me like I was an employee, and I acted like I was an employee. And so my internship was 3 months, but it was paid. but it was when it was done, I wasn't getting paid anymore, but I still asked if I could continue working as an intern unpaid throughout the school year once I moved back to Tucson, where I went to school. And I think that really was great for them because I was still working. There was a lot of national news happening where I was located. But I wasn't, saying, well, my internship ended technically with the payment. Can I continue that on? I was just working for free for a year, which paid off eventually into a full-time job. Right. So that was kind of how I was able to do that. And luckily they gave me the opportunity to continue working.
Well, that lesson of hard work, Katie, is so important. Taking that internship seriously, and really proving that they're somebody they would want to keep you on after the internship. I think that really matters.
Well, and really going into it wanting to develop a skill set. So as someone who works with interns now as a manager, the less on the job training you can do for your employer, the better. So if you can learn quickly, if you can learn new skills and bring them to your place of work, that will ultimately result in new opportunities for you. And you'll get promoted more quickly if you can prove that you already have the skill set and don't need to be trained necessarily to do a lot of this work. And also knowing what your worth is. I mean, I did this internship in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. I was getting published in bookstores nationally when I was in college. And then when I went back to Tucson, I figured I should do another internship. And this time I wanted to do something in broadcast. And it was an NBC affiliate, local affiliate. And they just parked me at a desk all day for 8 hours. And I asked to do things, I asked to help write scripts, and they just wouldn't let me do anything because I was an intern. And so I quit. I quit that internship after a day because I figured it would be worth more my time to be working at the local TV studio on campus where I was like producing and we were making these shows and going out and doing stories than it would be to do this full-time internship. So, I'm not a quitter at many things, but after having that experience, I felt like it was worth my time to be doing something different. So I actually quit an internship after that. So that was interesting. So
Well, I like how you talk about developing skill sets because I think a lot of time internships are intimidating. You're thinking, okay, what am I going to learn from this? But I think being very focused on developing those skill sets, I imagine, is really paid off because you're one who's not just doing print journalism, or writing blogs or tweets or doing, Fox News shows. You really developed a lot of different skills. And I wanted to ask you, Katie, we're talking a lot about leadership as an organization right now. What in terms of skills do you think has really helped you develop as a young leader? And what advice would you give to young women who want to be leaders on their campuses now?
So I have to give my parents a lot of credit for, I think, my leadership skills early on because they had this rule of if for so many sports camps that we did, we had to go to an academic camp. So they sent me actually to a few different leadership camps. I mean, actual leadership camps in high school. So one of them actually was in Washington, D.C. And then I did a lot of professional development in college outside of my schoolwork, and I continue to do that as a professional, my professional career. And I'm someone who really learns from watching other people and then trying to take what works for me and my kind of style of doing things based on other people's success and develop and use that in my own leadership opportunities. And so I really think that going out of your way to do things that are extracurricular to develop yourself constantly, even if you have the job that you want or you feel comfortable where you are, constantly developing professionally and as a leader is important. And you don't know everything. I think understanding that you can always learn something new. Just basic concepts of leadership. I think being responsible for the actions that you take. And once you make a decision, being firm and happy, you're not happy with the decision, but standing behind the decision, unwavering in the decision. Some leaders make decisions on their own. I like to get input from a lot of different people and then make an ultimate decision. So I think it really comes down to being effective in whatever way is your style, but eventually it needs to be an effective decision and style of leadership. So everyone kind of does their own thing, but there are some basic principles I think that you can take and then develop them into your own.
Well, and you've been very successful as a conservative young woman. You've risen at town hall, obviously risen at Fox. Could you talk a little bit about some of the unique challenges that you feel conservative women face, maybe on campus or professionally? I'd love to hear some stories of that and how you've overcome
Yeah.
challenges.
Yeah. So, I always caution against falling into this trap of, well, I'm a conservative woman and therefore I'm a victim of some kind of system. But there are some realities about the way that conservative women are treated versus liberal women when it comes to politics and when it comes to campus life. So, because we should be asking you this question, Karen, the whole reason that you created New was because there was no place for conservative women to go on campus, and so thankfully you started New, and now there is a place for like-minded women who aren't on board with this new wave of feminism, who aren't on board with being defined, womanhood being defined by abortion, for example. So I think on campus, it's been interesting to see when I've spoken on campus the way that I was treated versus liberal women and the way that they are treated. If I'm protested, it's perfectly acceptable, and it doesn't matter if it's very crude in the ways that I'm protested or who's doing the protesting. If I have to get security for my own safety, that's acceptable because I'm a conservative. But if a feminist comes to campus and receives the same kind of treatment, there are headline news that it's painted as, whoever's protesting her is misogynistic, and that they're anti-women. So that is certainly a challenge. I don't mind the protesting. I always invite people to come hear me speak, whether you're a conservative or not, because I think having a dialogue, especially on campus, is exactly what campus is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about engaging in debate and making arguments based on your ideas and your principles. And at the end of the day, you haven't convinced anybody, fine. But I found that you at least get people to think when they come listen. And I'm always open to listening to other people's perspectives as well, and trying to persuade them against that. And generally in politics, I think if you look at the way that women are treated, I guess I use the Trump White House as one example, and then I'll go into like races, congressional races. So Kayleigh McEnany is a mom, Sarah Huckabee Sanders is a mom, and they took on this White House press secretary job as young moms who have very young children, and they're not getting these profiles in women's magazines about how they have the ultimate work-life balance. But then you have Jen Psaki come into the White House as the White House press secretary under a Democratic administration, and they're all over it. Like she's a mom, she has the perfect life, she's a feminist, she's balancing her career and family, which is what every woman wants. And so there is kind of this unequal treatment in terms of the credit that conservative women don't get for doing some of the same things that liberal women get. Amy Coney Barrett, for example. She, of course, was attacked for having too much of a work-life balance. Like, how could she ever have that many children and be a Supreme Court justice, right? And you didn't see the feminist movement come to her defense on that argument because she disagrees with them on issues like abortion. I think it's interesting how former Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg always got the credit for being this feminist on the Supreme Court, this woman who broke the glass ceiling, when Sandra Day O'Connor was actually the first conservative Supreme Court justice on the bench. And so, I would say that's not necessarily an injustice, but it just isn't. Conservative women are not treated fairly in terms of the way that they are covered or portrayed in media.
Well, Katie, I think it's wonderful that you mentioned when you go to campuses, you actually want the other side to come and listen, because one thing I've noticed in the years that I've been running New is early on, there used to be more engagement. The feminists would show up, they'd ask questions.
Right.
And now there seems to be this trend of just silencing, like not even wanting the conservative voices to be heard on campus. Could you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the trends you've noticed in terms of campus speech?
Yeah. So, campus has always been a volatile environment for conservatives just because they're controlled by the left. But, this started in the 60s. It certainly continues until now, but you're absolutely right. It used to be a place where debate was welcomed, where there weren't these speech zones, where, people were brought to campus to have debates on big issues, whether it's abortion or climate change or politics or science. All of these things were happening, but now anymore, it's a matter of that person can't come speak at all. And it's never a leftist who's really banned from campus. It's always a right-leaning person. And I think that the persecution of conservative professors on campus has been also a real problem.
That
So
seems to
you're
be
right,
getting worse.
it is getting worse. I mean, if you don't have tenure, and even if you do have tenure as a conservative professor, your job is on the line if you dare to pull away from the doctrine of leftism in a place of academia where things are supposed to be open for debate. So it's certainly a hostile environment now. It's not just a matter of having rigorous debate. It's a dangerous environment to be in. I mean, the last few times that I've spoken on campus, I've needed security, which was
Wow.
not the norm before. So now anytime anybody from the right goes, and I wouldn't consider myself a controversial conservative. I mean, I'm a pretty mainstream conservative, and
But
yet
you're
I'm
conservative, so on
considered right,
campus.
but I'm conservative. So on campus, it's considered like I'm worse than Mao Zedong, right? Or like Marx, like Karl Marx. I am worse than that. And so, and those are the people, of course, that they idolize. So yeah, I think the campus environment is a very hostile one, and I'm not really sure how we change that, given that the professors are okay with it, the students are okay with it. It used to be just the professors were kind of more militant about it, but now the students are as well. So that's a problem.
The campus environment really is a problem. And you mentioned earlier the role that New is playing. Can you talk about how groups like New have impacted you and what difference they make?
Yeah, so New is actually part of my story coming to DC when I was an intern, going back to that. And my boss actually sent me to one of your conferences. It was like one of the very first conferences, and it was just a room at the Heritage Foundation. And now you have the entire stadium upstairs, or the amphitheater rather, upstairs, where people come to the conference every year. So being in that room while I was in DC, where I didn't know anybody, really allowed me to go back to campus understanding that, okay, there are other people out there who think just like me, and I just need to find them, and we need to have chapters like New on campus and in order to give people a place to go, because they just don't know where each other are. And what I love about New is especially the book club portion of it, because it really encourages women to educate themselves and to develop themselves and to read books that will give them skill sets and different perspectives on different issues, and a lot of information they can use in debates or to form their own opinions about controversial issues. So yeah, I mean, chapters like New are really important for young women on campus because they don't have anywhere else to go. And now that they're persecuted for daring to have just a different opinion or to not have an opinion at all about an issue, I think it's more important than ever.
It's one of those, Katie, I have to admit, where on the one hand, I love it that we're growing and there's more chapters on campuses across the country. On the other hand, it's sad that they really need it, right? Like college
Yeah.
campuses shouldn't be such a tough spot for conservative women. And now we're even finding it's not just the faculty and the administrators that create an environment that's tough for conservative women. It's also the students. We're finding more and more hostility from the students themselves who want to enforce the idea that they get to decide what speech is allowed to be said on
Right.
campus. Have you noticed that as well?
I have, and I've noticed, these student governments that run, the allocation of funding, or they run the allocation of rooms for speakers. It's not a matter of just having a disagreement. It's that they want full monopoly. They want to fully monopolize what kind of debate they're having on campus. I mean, we've gone from being able to have debate to certain words are offensive and are violence against people. I mean, it's not, if you use the wrong pronoun now in a number of college campuses, you're essentially reprimanded or expelled for even saying the wrong thing. And so that's certainly a shift away from just we disagree, we're not going to hang out together, we're not going to be in a book club together, but you at least have the right to say these things. Now you're seeing this argument that words are violence and therefore people need to be punished for it, certain books need to be banned. I mean, if there's any place that you should be reading all kinds of different books, it's on college campuses. I mean, I don't believe in Karl Marx, but I have a number of his writings because I want to learn about what he believes in so I can develop my own thoughts on these issues. And so, yeah, I mean, history does not bode well for the shutdown of debate. I mean, in the way that regimes around the world, whether it's China or Venezuela or North Korea, operate when it comes to having no access to information or different perspectives. But that's really what we're seeing on college campuses now. Like you said, it's not just professors and administrators, it's the students as well. And then they go out and work in newsrooms, which is why you're seeing all this stuff happening in the media with kind of these similar college campus ideas.
Katie, I'm always so impressed with how you've taken ownership of your education and how that has allowed you to then cover a broad array of topics from Second Amendment to feminism. Could you talk about what is a story that you've covered where you felt you've made a big impact, or what's been your favorite story to cover?
So I think I've covered a lot of different stories that I really am grateful for, and they're all so different. But I think the one that had the most well, there's a few. Um, the number one thing that I think I'd have an impact on was a couple of years ago when President Obama nominated this attorney named Debo Adegbile to lead the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice. And the person who heads the Civil Rights Division in DOJ is in charge of overseeing police departments across the country, holding them accountable, reprimanding them when they do things wrong. This was right around the time of Ferguson with Michael Brown and when the Black Lives Matter movement was starting, and really when we started to see this anti-police movement starting that we're still seeing today. And I worked with a couple of different sources who I had known through various things, and we find out that he had represented and tried to overturn the death penalty for a cop killer named Mumia Abu Jamal in Pennsylvania. And we eventually put so much pressure on that nomination that Democrats ended up voting against his nomination and he didn't get the job. So I felt like that was a win. And I guess some people would call that activism, but I'm a conservative journalist. I don't hide the fact that I come at my work from a certain perspective, and we cover certain issues based on that perspective. But that was probably one of the bigger ones. Going way back, publishing my first book, which became a New York Times bestseller about Operation Fast and Furious. That was really rewarding to me because it wasn't a story that was being covered heavily in the mainstream media, and the families involved never really got their justice. They still don't have their justice, but at least putting it in black and white on paper in a historical record, I think was important for that. And then, yeah, I mean, there's a few other things that I've done, but those are probably the two biggest I can think of right now.
Oh, that's great. I think making sure those voices are heard, that's so important.
Yeah.
And Katie, I want to turn, we've got two student questions that I'd love to
Okay,
ask you.
great. Sure.
One comes from Franchetta from Catholic University, and she wrote in to ask, with so many commentators and voices in political dialogue today, how do you find your own unique way of speaking on political issues in your own voice and then making your voice heard?
So for me, every single day is not about making my voice heard. It's about what can I teach other people? What do people not know about a certain topic that I'm assigned to write about or to talk about on a show? What part of the story that we're talking about or covering has not been done yet? What can I teach people that is new? And so I just think that you have to maintain your own dedication to yourself. I think if you start it's like running a race, like, when you're running a race against other people on a track, in a track meet, right? If you start looking to the side too much, it's distracting and you're going to slow down. So if you can kind of understand what's going on beside you, but stay focused on the end goal, then you'll do well. So I think, staying true to yourself, covering the topics that you find interesting, and teaching people something new is really a good way to maintain your credibility and I guess your relevancy. But I don't wake up every day thinking, how can I get my voice heard? It's how can I bring new and important information to people who are taking their time to watch me and listen to me.
That's such a helpful way of framing this. And you mentioned teaching, which is going to be the
Yeah.
perfect transition to our next question
Great.
from Laura Donna, who's going to create a teaching moment for you, I think. She asked,
Okay.
what has been some of the largest setbacks you faced while trying to accomplish your goals?
Biggest setbacks. Ooh. I don't, I don't know if I've had like any major setback. Um, I feel like, things have happened for a reason. Um, yeah, I don't know if I have an answer to that. Not that I haven't made mistakes or been disappointed in things that haven't happened or gone the right way, but I don't think I've had a major setback. Here's a good example early on. So I actually interviewed to work as a spokesperson for Young America's Foundation, and I didn't get the job, and I was disappointed. And but that resulted in me getting a full-time job at Town Hall, which has led to where I am now. So something that I thought was a setback turned into something that was meant to be. So I think if you can take disappointments or setbacks or things that maybe weren't in the plan and understand, they might not understand why they're happening right now, but eventually you'll understand why things are happening the way that they are, and try and see the positive in it. Then you can use it in a positive way to move forward. So
Well, that's such a great message to end on, Katie. I really want to thank you for being our May Conservative Woman of the Month.
thank
I'd love
you
it
for
if you,
having me. I'm so grateful. It's so nice of you. Thank you.
yes, and I'd love it if you could share your social media accounts and let people know where they
Yep.
can find you if they're not already following you.
Yep. So you can see my writing at townhall.com. You can see me on Fox News, and you can also find me and my dog mostly on my Instagram page, which is just my name, and on Twitter as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Katie.
Thanks, Karen.